guys, welcome back to another episode of Writer's Workshop here at Beauty in the Bookcase. So last week I started talking about how to write very good description, and I said today I would go more in depth with how to use lighting to improve your story. Now when I'm writing, I like to think about it as a movie or almost like pictures or paintings. And of course when I'm thinking of a scene, then in my mind I'm trying to picture as many details as possible. And one of the biggest things that I think we miss out on often is incorporating lighting into our stories. Now, I don't just mean like it was daylight, it was afternoon, it was sunset or sunrise. Now, it's very simple to just talk about lighting in the sense of day and night. Anyone can picture that. However, there's a way to use color cleverly enough to convey emotions, feelings, and set a mood. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So a few years ago, I wrote a story called Art is Dead, and I really wanted to experiment with color in this story. So the story just talks about this writer who is having writer's block. I know, shockingly creative. No one's ever written about that before. But the fun thing about this is he starts out only concerned with his own problem, and as he starts to see the realities of the world around him, the world gets darker and darker. The story starts out with very bright, vibrant colors and ends up being a monochrome world where only red is the only color to be found. Now the color red I use throughout the story in many different places and situations to indicate the importance of it. The relevance that it had, it was passion and fear and anger. Now the fun thing is that I sort of took a page out of James Joyce's Ulysses or the short story Maggie, a Girl from the Streets, which actually was what inspired this story. Well, not the plot, but just the concept. So it's the idea of this character who's just walking down a road. He's just walking down the street, but as he gets further and further away from his reality, the world starts becoming darker. So he starts out in a world that has bright colors and everything is vibrant and alive and just full of light. So of course, it is the morning, but you can also use the colors around to sort of bring in lightness to your stories. You can talk about vibrant colors like yellow and orange and electric blue. And you can even use colors like violet and fuchsia to bring in that idea of life, of liveliness to a scene. And it doesn't mean that every single color needs to represent something. It doesn't have to be symbolic, but it can help to bring in a mood, to set a mood of brightness and lightness into your story. And then as he walks down the street, those bright colors start to turn sort of into gem colors or metallic colors. So it's a lot of coppers and emeralds and rubies. So they're still colors we'd associate with vibrancy, but the shades are starting to get darker. And they continue to go then into neutrals. It's grays and browns until we get into just blacks and whites and that vibrant red. Now the point of having something so dark contrasted with such a bright color is to create that mood and to create that emphasis that I was trying to make in the importance of this character's mental health sort of, I guess, crumbling. What I'm trying to say is not that you need to use color symbolically. You can still use color for the same purpose, but often we go into describing things with either very cliche metaphors or with the base colors. So we'll be like, well, it was pink or it was blue or green or yellow. But a very fun thing to do is to actually research different shades and find something specific. Make it stand out, make it real. A yellow dress, everyone's seen a yellow dress, but it's the same problem as we were talking last week, where it was when you talk about a coffee shop, everyone has a different image. Likewise, when you talk about clothing or even furniture or homes or whatever you're trying to set, you need to think about seasons, you need to think about lighting, you need to think about style, you need to think about everything and really take into consideration how a color would actually come across in a certain way. And it's not then just the red wine, it's burgundy, right? Or if you have trees, they might be emerald but they also might be lime green, you know, if it's like just spring and everything's very bright. It's very good to use reference photos for this. I think it helps you think outside the box, because of course, mentally when you're thinking about it, you go like, oh, okay, trees. And trees are green. Wow, revelation. But when you have reference photos, you can start picking out little tiny details. For example, if it's a tree going into the fall, you know, you can have very like lime green kind of leaves or even emerald green, but then they're starting to shift into ochre, or some of them are on the ground, and you can compare them to the color of coffee or chocolate. And you know, you have orange leaves, which you can refer to in different variations. Same with red, you know, you can have scarlet leaves or you can have burgundy leaves. But the point is, you want to create a world that's specific enough to stand out, because there's a million books and everyone's coming into books with their own experiences. And that's not to say that people aren't allowed to and they shouldn't project their own experiences into a story. However, you're still the master of this world. You're still the creator. And as the creator, you have some control on how you portray this. I think what happens often is that when books become movies, everyone has a different idea of what's been said to them. Now, the more specific you are, the more difficult it'll be to find somebody who fits a specific description, of course. And you might not find exactly that. However, your reader is coming to expect something that you have to deliver to a certain degree. If you're vague, then of course everything can be replaced. But the problem is, and the reason why people get so upset, what happens is though that when people see a character that they've become familiar with, or a scenery, or even the clothing, you know, they've read these books. Sometimes they've read them multiple times, so they're very familiar with the content. So when you change it, when you alter it in the movie or in the TV show or whatever, people get upset because this character is real to them. And that's why it's important to create a three-dimensional character and to be specific in your description, because you want your readers to connect and you want this person to be real. Sure, of course, there's troubles if you are sort of changing mediums from book to TV or film. But the reason that people get so upset is because they've developed an attachment. It's because they have an idea in their head that you planted there, and whatever they're seeing isn't matching it. So what's the importance of lighting? Well, lighting can change everything. Lighting can turn a scene from something sinister to something bright. And you can use lighting to express a mood or to set a scene. For example, last week when we were talking about the coffee shop scene, I was talking about the street lamps, and I was saying that it was a rainy day, but that it wasn't sad rainy. It was romantic rainy with the street lamps. So how do you convey that? How can you use color to convey that? Well, for example, if I was trying to write a scene where it's a dreary, rainy day, I would talk about how life seemed dull and colorless. You could talk about how there was no color in the rain, or how the lights just seemed gray and there was no sound except for the clicking shoes. And so if I'm trying to convey sort of a romantic aura over this, you know, you talk about how the little raindrops glitter, and you talk about how the street lamps cast like a golden shadow and the cobblestone was silvery like a moonbeam, and you would talk about that bright blue umbrella, and you'd make sure that all these colors are coming in to sort of counter that that darkness and that dreariness of the rainy day that this person is picturing. And a really interesting example about this can actually be found in a story called Everything is Green. It's about a 3-page story, I think, by David Foster Wallace, and that was the story that made me want to write short stories. I'm very much a person who likes novels and longer form fiction, but there's so much packed, and it's quite a sad story, and it's very much about struggling with depression. But so the story is called Everything Green, and there's this scene towards the end where he's having a confrontation with his partner and she goes like, well, how can you say the things that you're feeling when outside everything is green? And then he kind of counteracts by being like, well, these toys aren't green and the truck outside isn't green and this and that isn't green. And that is such a powerful way of using color to create lighting and to create shadows and set a scene. Because of course, if somebody tells you everything is green, you think spring, you think happy, bright colors, right? And that's sort of what she's conveying is, how can you feel sad? How can you feel depressed if in your life everything is wonderful, everything is alive, seemingly? But then he sort of counteracts with, well, you know, you're seeing the big picture. You're seeing through the window just the greenness. I'm seeing all the small details, all the little things that aren't right, all the things that are dull and crumbling and falling apart and they're wet. And I thought that was so powerful. And I think that's why it's so important to learn how to play with light, how to play with color, to convey emotion, because we don't often think about it. We just think about description and we just think about color as serving the simple purpose of just telling people what they're supposed to see. You'd go, there's a red book over there with some white and some black books. There's a painting right behind me with blue, green, and a lot of black, a little bit of like a pinkish purple. The walls behind me are white. Great. I have said something quite drab, but you can turn that around by using descriptive colors. You can talk about the scarlet book and the onyx right behind it and how it's contrasted by a beautiful pearl, and how there's a painting behind depicting a beautiful galaxy in the night, and how the white in the room illuminates everything, or how there's light coming from the window making everything bright, making certain colors stand out. So that's a good exercise to take home this week to practice. So play around with light, play around with color, and figure out a way to use color beyond just serving a descriptive purpose. Use it to convey a meaning, to set a mood, to set a scene. Because your scene doesn't just have to be the place, and your story doesn't have to just be told by the people speaking. There's a whole story within every single story that's told about all those colors and those lights and those elements that we don't think about. You know, another good example comes to mind, which I found fascinating. There is a book that I bought years ago, and they have this painting called El Baquiné, or El Velorio del Angelito. It's a really famous painting back home by the painter Francisco Yer, and it depicts the funeral of a small child. And it's really jarring because it's sort of like everyone around is having a party, but then, you know, there's a funeral happening, and it's a massive painting. It's the size of a wall. It's ginormous, and it's beautiful. And I bought this book there about that painting, and the author had done something really interesting. They sort of told the story from the perspective of everyone in the scene, but they also used the paints used, the brushes used, the guard that was looking over the painting for years. And I think that's also a really good exercise to put into action. Sort of think about what would be the perspective of these different elements in the scene. What do they serve to do? What do they have to say about this story? If the lighting was real, if the umbrella was real, if the windows were real, what would they say about the world? How would they view the world? All right, guys, so I think that about does it for today. All right, I'll see you guys next time.